Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Smithsonian for here in person as well as online. My name is Thorsten Diko. I'm the co-chair of the Department of Entomology, and I welcome everybody to this event to celebrate the life and career of David Adamski. I just have a few housekeeping notes and just a tiny bit about David maybe before we get to the speakers who then talk about him and his career and his life in more details. Rebecca Johnson, the chief scientist in the museum, regrets not to be here, but she is in meetings, as an administrator. So Sean, Brady, and me are sort of the highest level people you see here today from the museum, I guess, as part of the Department of Entomology. I wanted to first thank Talita Simos particularly for putting this together. She did most of the work, helped by Tom Gwen, Kiki Farley, Aaron Kolsky, Dana DeRoche, Marion Bundys, Ian Emanuel, and Maureen O'Leary, and sort of they put the program together and the speakers and all that sort of stuff. So we're just standing here to do this. There will be presentations, and then there's food and on the side room after that to mingle and maybe share about a little bit more about David. For the speakers, because we want to keep it somewhat going and not too long, even though it's hard to be short, Talita will show up as sort of an orange Post-it note that indicates you have 2 more minutes in your allotted time. And that's just to keep going because we want to get through this and enjoy our, treats as well. David was affiliated with the museum for many years, and basically since he finished his Ph.D. in 1987 at Mississippi State University, he came here as a contractor contracting on several Lepidoptera groups, I guess the curation, and he worked with John Brown. Then when he was hired as a support scientist in 1990, and so since then he has been working for the USDA Agricultural Research Service Systematic Entomology Lab here at the Smithsonian, or based here at the Smithsonian at the museum, and he retired in 2016, and after that, which was at the time the usual thing for entomologists from both the Smithsonian and the USDA, he became a research associate, so he can continue his visits to the museum, gets an office space, gets a badge that gets him in and out, and to continue his research that really lasted until his death. And there were a number of publications that are coming out or have come out since he passed away in October of last year on his active research project. And with that, that's all I want to say. And you all have the program book, I hope, in your hand, so you see who's coming up. But the first speaker will be Richard Brown, who is from Mississippi State University. Richard?
Thank you. Can everyone see me here? I don't see myself on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Okay. I met Dave back in 1979 when I was a grad student at Cornell, and Dave, I've always called him Dave since I've met him, was at the University of Massachusetts. He contacted me and said, "Hey, can I come visit you for a couple of days over the Christmas break?" I said, "Sure." So he came, and it was just happening that my sister and my sister-in-law had sent me all these Christmas packages of fudge and fruitcake and all kinds of candy. So those couple of days turned into a whole week that Dave visited me. And we talked about the idea of working together. I came here in the fall of 1980, and the following year, Dave came and became my first student. While he was here, he distinguished himself from other students in being so thorough, and he got interested in these blastobasid moths, one of which feeds on acorns, and he proceeded to collect acorns from all 28 species of oaks in Mississippi, including one on the offshore islands. He talked to fishermen into taking them across a boat to get that 28th species and to rear out blastobasis and see what else might be in there. Well, Dave was very thorough in everything he did, including making dissections. I think he made over 2,000 slide mounts of dissections. Let's go to the first slide. Dave was a favorite among our grad students here. He's shown here with a trip we made, a museum collecting trip for a week to the Smoky Mountains. And he joined us in other week-long expeditions for collecting, and he was well liked by our students, who kidded him a lot and asked him to please not eat kippers in the seminar room during seminar. Evidently the smell they didn't like. Well, Dave went ahead and finished up his dissertation, and it was an outstanding piece of work that was published in our museum series shown here. And it had these amazing drawings. Dave was a very gifted artist. And you can see here one of the drawings of the heads. And by the way, we have more copies of his publication if anyone is interested. He did lots of caricatures. He did the cover for the newsletter. And he also helped other students with their artwork. And so he was a pleasure to work with. He supported his own work. He got grants from Sigma Xi, National Science Foundation, Harvard. When the Entomological Society of America decided to recognize an outstanding researcher in morphology, and he was the first recipient of the Entomological Society Comstock Award that came with a cash amount. With his dissertation improvement grant, he was able to go to the British Museum of Natural History for 2 months and do his work there. So Dave was very independent and self-sustaining during the time he was here. Now were able to hire him as a teaching assistant, and he was one of the favorite, got outstanding reviews as a teaching assistant for the insect taxonomy course and immature insects. And so one of the things that Dave asked me when we kept in touch over the years, more so than with any other student or ex-colleague, and he called me back in August and he said, "Rich, I'm in hospice." I said, "Oh," and he said, "I've got a favor to ask." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Would you play a song at my memorial service?" And I said, "Well, sure." I said, "What would you like? Amazing Grace?" He says, "No, not that." He said, "What about that Irish song you do?" And he was talking about a song called Minstrel Boy, about this young man going to fight a war in another country, and then there's different endings, but the one I've heard is he comes back into his home village and he's playing his pipes, and he passes through the village and then going on to the next village, and the people celebrate the return of this young man. Here's the Minstrel Boy.
Thank you, Richard, for those words and the music, which was beautiful. Next speaker is John Brown. Dance is there. Just on the, is that one there? No. Okay.
Oh, it's nice to see such a large group here this afternoon. So we entomologists are an odd lot. See, somehow it didn't advance. There we go. Even beyond the obvious. It's hard to explain how and why we derive so much pleasure from looking at some dead, dried up old insect stuck on a pin, but somehow it happens. We kind of can, if we look at enough of these things, we start to understand patterns of character evolution, biogeographic patterns, structural evolution in things, and it just that's kind of why we do it. And sometimes it seems that it's crazy that we sit all day hunched over a microscope looking at some dead character, but of course, sometimes we find some remarkable discoveries. So in this regard, David Adamski was really like one of us. He had this enormous passion and an insatiable curiosity for a group called a moth called Blastobasids, and actually he was probably the world authority on this family, the moth family Blastobasidae, lovingly referred to as blasted bastards. I think a term that the late Jack Clark coined. Jack Clark was the chairman of this department, 50, 60 years ago, something like that. And so here are these handsome characters here, and as you can see, they come in every possible shade of gray, and not more than 50 actually. And but these pictures of pinned adults really don't do them justice. They're really quite fantastic when they're alive. Not really. They're just as ugly alive as they are dead. So there you have it. So Dave was not only this wonderful entomologist and a gifted researcher, but he also had this wonderful talent for training young people. He was a talented illustrator, and he had this passion for hockey. And when I say he was a hockey, enthusiast, I don't mean it was just somebody who watched a couple of games a week on the television. No, nobody could remember exactly when Dave first picked up a pair of skates or a hockey stick. But by the time he was a sophomore at American International University, Dave was vying for the coveted position of goalie on the varsity hockey team there. And you can see from this newspaper article here that that's young Dave on the far left there. Yeah. So Dave played varsity hockey his entire undergraduate career. And even after graduating, he played on a semi-pro team, the Bristol Champlains of the Southern New England Hockey League. And at the same time, he coached hockey at Southampton High School. Years later, even when he arrived in Washington, Dave was still a hockey enthusiast, knee deep in hockey. He coached the youngsters at the Bowie Hockey Association, and also played competitively till about 1979. I mean, hell, he had to be nearly 50 years old at that time and still playing hockey. So clearly, this was no, general little hobby. This was clearly a passion of Dave's. And here you can see him in his best in his hockey regalia here. And you might notice he's not wearing any headgear, and that might explain a lot. Actually, I'm sure when he played, he probably wore headgear. So anyway. So in addition to that, Dave, of course, was this wonderful educator, and he was not the professorial type, quite the opposite. His goal was to train young minds into, opening up them to the wonderful world of science, and also kind of instilling in them this appreciation for nature. And I mean, just look at the happy faces of these young biologists to be across the bottom here. I'm sure these guys will soon be replacing you guys in 20 years or so. So yeah. So Dave was a fixture in the Smithsonian Early Enrichment Center here at the Smithsonian, referred to as SEEK, for 2 decades, teaching kindergartners about science. He also was spearheaded a group of internships here in the entomology department. Excuse me. For several years, and then about maybe 15 years ago or so, he, with the support of the Entomological Society of Washington, he formed this group, the Young Entomologist Group, frequently known by its acronym MEAG, and they did just great things. And you're going to hear both about SEEK, the Smithsonian Early Enrichment Center, and YEG from some other folks. But I just have to give you a few teasers from those groups. So here's just a couple of the core folks from YEG. You notice Dana DeRoche there, who's probably in the audience here. She's a fixture in entomology here. Megan McCarthy, who was an intern here several years ago, and Elmore Brown. And again, you'll see these folks in all these sorts of pictures where you look at YEG folks. And so here's a group, Vishai Malakul here in the middle there at one of the YEG meetings, and he's teaching the kids how to draw a butterfly. And of course, you can spot, if you look close enough, there's Megan, and there's Dana, and there's the Davises back there in the background as well. And here's one of the annual horseshoe crab tagging events, which was really a kick. And again, I see Dana and I see Megan, you get the same folks over and over. And I actually took my grandkids on one of these, and I just loved it. Dave had this way of teasing, fun and science together into one big ball of wax that was really a kick. And then here they are doing aquatic insect collecting on one of the field trips. Well, so in the museum, Dave had this casual way of wandering into your office and finding a vacant chair, making himself comfortable, and then asking you, got a minute? I mean, how could you say no? I mean, he's sitting there. And so Dave and I would have these chats at least once a week or so, and it was always about science. We talk about, Galechioid phylogeny, or the evolution of secondary characters, or stuff like that, or maybe even what journal made the best color plates and things like that. And during these conversations, one of Dave's pet peeves and one of my favorite expressions was a thing he called salami science. He got all over this. And this is when a scientist or a researcher has a really big project, one of these decade-long things. I'm sure you guys who are researchers in the audience know these. And rather than having the patience to accumulate all the molecular data and the morphological stuff and get all the illustrations that, are going to take forever and produce a huge tome, you would actually chop it into more manageable, publishable pieces that you could put out on an annual basis, and so you could keep your publication rolling. And Dave didn't like that aspect, and he had a lot of opinions about science that were kind of interesting. And it was in this context, talking about science and salami and stuff like that I kind of knew Dave best. And so what I'd like to do is just take a few minutes and talk about sort of Dave's educational experiences and also his scientific contributions. So Dave, as we heard, started out at American International College, where he got a bachelor's in business administration. Go figure. I mean, what a weird thing. And then his master's was in special education. So, they're the beginnings of this educational thing. After a couple of years of being out in the wild, he discovered that he had this really intense interest in natural history. So he went back to school, back to UMass this time, got a bachelor's and a master's in entomology. And then we heard from Rich, he got his Ph.D. there at Mississippi State. Well, at UMass, he worked under this fellow, T. Michael Peters, and actually it worked on totricity, which is my favorite group, and of course one of the fabulous groups in Lepidoptera. Who could work on anything better? And so Peters actually was very helpful, and they, out of his master's, Dave actually got 3 publications, which are pretty remarkable. And these all were kind of focused on morphology, was really kind of in Dave's wheelhouse. And again, Peters had him distribute these things through different journals. I mean, one is in the Canad Ant, one's American Ant Soc, and one's even a proc of the Entomological Society of Washington. So really good. This is really for a master's, that's a lot of stuff. And so then, of course, Dave went to Mississippi State, where Rich convinced him to work on Galechioids. Oh my God, really the dark side of Lepidoptera. Blastobasids, even worse, these tiny little, ugly little things. So anyway, so we heard about that from Rich. So after he graduated from Mississippi State, then he was here at the museum, as Torsten mentioned, for a couple of years doing contract work in Lepidoptera. But by 1990, then he was hired as a support scientist for SEL, the Systematic Entomology Lab. And in that role, Dave was assigned to research scientists to support their research. And during the course of his career, he worked for Alma and Ron Hodges, Tom Henry. He worked for me, Mike Pogue, and then at the end of his career for Gary Miller and Mano Choa. So the downside of this position was that Dave had no time for original research. All of his research on blastobasses had to be after hours, on weekends, and at home. So it makes his publication record truly remarkable. Of course, the positive side of this was that since he got to work for all these folks and all these different insect groups, he developed this really broad background in Lepidoptera and in a lot of other groups in general. And also he got to have the opportunity to publish some papers in these. So he published at least one paper with Alma, 3 or 4 with Ron, one with Tom, and several papers with me. So again, adding to his publication record there. Let's see, what do we have here? So for me, these are probably Dave's most significant contributions. All in all, he published about 120 papers in entomology over his career, which is quite a bunch. It's pretty impressive stuff. That includes everything from symposia proceedings to book reviews and short scientific articles and even to larger monographic treatments, which these 4 are. And you can see from this first paper here, this is probably a continuation of his Ph.D. dissertation. It was interesting. I went to the library to track this thing down to make a copy of this page here for this slide. And I thought, God, I wonder who the editor was at Thomas A. Pubs at that time. And they opened the front cover, and it was me. It's amazing how you form these relationships and stuff that you don't even remember. But this community is such that, you just have this connection with these folks. So by his second paper here, Hochlersinia, a tribe of blastos, you can see Dave had finally jumped on this Costa Rican bandwagon. And all the Lepidopters and a lot of entomologists at the Smithsonian hopped on that thing too, because Dan Jansen had this huge project in Costa Rica where he was rearing gobs and gobs of stuff. So he had all these reared specimens. So he had host plant data and he was barcoding it. So we had DNA data. So it was really great. So all of us were jumping in on this. Unfortunately, with Dave, there wasn't a whole lot of host plant data because indeed his things weren't particularly phytophagous. Anyway, these are the 2 other monographs that he did, and I got the 2-minute thing here, so I'm going to have to scoot through this. Whoops, backwards. Sorry about that. So in addition to this morphology and stuff, Dave was also interested in biological control of things that involve galecchioids. And so he teamed up with this gal, Susan Wright, the woman here, the blonde-haired woman, and they went to Thailand to work on biological control agents of downy rose myrtle. Here they are in the field, and here they are in the lab in the field. And let's see, here we go. And here's the paper that came from that. You can see the driver here, Dave and Susan, and this young fellow on the far right is Nandasek Pinkau from Ketsar University there in Thailand. So this was a very nice paper talking about the life history. And these things were doing a good job of chomping on myrtle. Here's Dave thinking about enjoying the local cuisine. Tastes like chicken? Yeah, I'm not sure about that. And then this is Dave collaborated with a lot of folks, and one of them was this kid here, Kenji Nishida. And Kenji was just marvelous field guy. He just found all sorts of cool and interesting stuff. And about 20 years ago, nearly half the staff here in entomology had co-authored a paper with Kenji. He found mostly gall insects and stuff, and so everybody teamed up with him. And Dave actually met him when he was doing his work at MBO, Costa Rica, and actually served on Kenji's PhD committee. And sometime Dave got interested in lac insects. Lac insects is a small coxid that produces a substance that's used to make shellac, and it's quite an industry in Thailand. And so off they went to Thailand again, look for these lac insects. And here's Kenji and Dave, and also Nan again working on this lac insect. And here's a very fine paper that they published on that. And then, of course, when they weren't busy after hours, they'd go collecting butterflies using the local transportation there, Kenji in tow. And it looks like fun, although I would hope you wouldn't fall off. So let me quickly close here with just a couple of thoughts. I know I'm running out of time. Sorry about that. Dave, if you knew him, he loved to laugh, and he'd laugh at any damn thing. I have no idea what he's laughing at here, and he also enjoyed laughing at himself, which I think is a really endearing human quality. And so I think Dave will be remembered for a long time by both students and colleagues, both in his own backyard and around the planet. So thank you very much for your time.
Sorry for that. We can certainly share the presentation slides at a later time so everybody can look over that. Thank you, John, for those nice pictures. The next speaker is going to be Wayne Mathis. And I didn't introduce John correctly. He is a retired USDA SEL curator, and Wayne Mathis is a retired emeritus Smithsonian curator of Diptera.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure for us to be here to honor David Adamski. I'm wearing this vest deliberately You saw in all of John Brown's photos of David Adamski, he was wearing a vest. And that's frequently all he would wear in the summer or winter. So please remember that image, and this is the vest. I need more pockets. That's right. I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'll speak briefly. I have no technical difficulties. When I prepared my talk, I found out that I'm going to emphasize passions of David Adamski, and they all begin with the letter F. Family. I was delighted to meet Tracy. Tracy is Jimmy's daughter, and her sons and husband, Simon and Adam. I learned all about David Adamski's family. He was passionate about his family. Jimmy, Tracy's father, was a fish and game officer, and his older brother, Carl, who's passed away, was a lawyer, and his daughter, Karen, is also an attorney and is handling much of David's legal affairs, his estate. Another passion of David's was food. And we loved to go to Sardi's in Beltsville. Sardi's is a Peruvian chicken rotisserie place, and they had ample servings of vegetables and salads to go with your chicken. And we would nearly always make a trip to Sardi's. Tracy, you need to go to Sardi's. Another passion was his Subaru Forester. And it had to be not just any Forester, it had to have a stick shift. He felt only comfortable riding a stick shift, and when it wore out, he was sorely disappointed that he could only on a special order could he get a vehicle, an SUV with a stick shift. But he ended up with a Honda that had an automatic, and he immediately totaled it. And then bought another Honda, and that's the one that he had when he passed away. Another passion of David's is one that John Brown mentioned, was his fostering of students. Young students in Sikh, those in the young entomologist, but many of you didn't know that he taught in high school, or maybe it was a junior high. And that then it was taking T. Michael Peters' class in general entomology that he found the passion of entomology and decided to pursue that as a career, and ended up at Mississippi State with Richard Brown. The one I want to focus on now, the last passion, is doing field work. Perhaps the most significant field trip I took with David was to Aldabra, which is a coral atoll in the middle of the Indian Ocean. So getting there is problematic. We flew Pan Am to Senegal, then to Liberia. Liberia, we got stopped because an engine blew on, and they needed a part from France, and they had to fly down the part from France. Eventually, we got started again. We went to Nigeria and Kenya, and we went on a safari in Kenya. This was under the direction of Brian Kinsley, who was then in invertebrate zoology. Eventually, we made it out to the Seychelles, to Mahi, the main island of the Seychelles, where we caught a yacht, a motorized yacht, and we took 4 days to get down to Aldabra. Aldabra is one of the few places in the world where they had those giant tortoises, like on the Galapagos Islands. They used to have them at other islands. They've been extirpated. On the way back, Brian had a few extra dollars, so we got to spend an extra week, David and I, in Mahi. David had one of Don Davis's, Manon, one of Don Davis's light traps, which kind of looks exotic. It's a metal affair. It's higher than wide, cylindrical with baffles, and it has a black light in it. And in the bottom, you put calcium or potassium cyanide. He had made arrangements with the director of the botanical garden. We set it up one evening. I had finished my pinning, so we decided to go to the movie. So we went into Victoria, the capital, and across the street was a ice cream shop. I said, let's go get an ice cream cone. Been a long time since we'd had an ice cream cone. We went and got one. As we're walking across the street to go to the movie, two plainclothesmen jumped us, and we were detained. I thought, what on earth? And they separated us, took us down to the police station, began to question us. Pretty soon a plainclothesman came in, and he kind of was laughing. He said, I figured out what you guys are doing. You're entomologists, aren't you? And I said, yes. And he said, well, there's only one problem. You cleared having that trap set up by the director, but none of the personnel under the director knew about it. And so they thought it was some kind of space communication with a satellite or whatever, and that we were spying. So that's why we were detained. The only problem is that the trap had been turned over to the security, and the security force at the time, and probably still, on the Seychelles was provided by the North Koreans. And we thought, holy moly, what if one of those North Koreans sticks his nose in there, takes a good deep of cyanide gas, and well, it didn't happen. And we went up to their fortress and we were able to retrieve the trap. But it's only with David that I was nearly arrested, detained, held to being a spy. By the way, the plainclothesman says this is nothing. The year before, some botanist was doing a transect, and he had a line, and every 10 feet or whatever it was along that line, he was writing down in a notebook the names of the plants in Latin. And the security force was absolutely sure that it was code. And they held him overnight. Well, I've had many adventures with David since, most of them on the pleasant side. And both he and I eventually did publish he published on I think he found a single new species on Aldabra, and I wrote a paper with a Polish colleague on the shore flies of the Seychelles Islands. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Talita, and thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Wait.
Yeah. Do you want to go to Zoom?
No, I just want to make it bigger here.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Arrow.
Is this? That start
Yeah.
from the beginning now?
Yes.
Present like full screen.
Yeah, this is
Here.
there.
And let me see here. Oh, where is it? No. Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you, Wayne. Our next speaker is Emran Kamara.
Good afternoon. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about Dr. Adamski, the supervisor and the mentor. A little bit more on the personal side, it's like the friend. I first met him, it was 2008. I was waiting for my dad to get back from work to take us home. I was living out in Upper Marlboro at the time. I was a student at High Leadership Public Charter School, right? And I was at the library, MLK Library, and I was there with my little brother, and I was probably playing RuneScape or World of Warcraft or something at the time, like the little kids do, right? Just really, really engrossed in my game. Then one of the librarians came up to me and said, hey, you know, they're playing with roaches back there. Roaches. Okay, with me being the normal kid with normal interests that I was, I decided, I'm gonna check out these roaches, right? So I go back there, and there Dr. Adamski is with these roaches like the size of small mice, right? I'm like, damn, those are some big ass roaches. And he explained, okay, hey, I'm a scientist at the Natural History Museum, and I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about insects. I'm like, oh, okay. Those are only like maybe like three other kids in there. Like seriously. But so he explains about what the insects are made of. It's okay, they're made of this like special materials called isn't it called like chitin or something like that? I learned it in a video game, right? It's like, yeah, that's absolutely right. It said, do you know the three parts of an insect? Is it the head, the thorax, and the abdomen, right? Yeah, that is very good. I've done this a couple times before. You know all the answers already. Hey, do you know what we're gonna do with these big roaches? They're called Madagascar hissing roaches. I was like, oh, okay, what are we gonna do with them? We're gonna race them. I'm like, oh, okay. So what do you want us to do? Like prod them with the sticks? No, you're gonna use your finger, prod them along. I'm like, okay. So we get like a whole bunch of roaches out there and we start racing them, right? And obviously I won because I was like the least afraid of all the kids in there to actually touch them. The trick is it's not just like lightly tap them like you're provoking them, right? They'll move faster, kind of like a horse, the horse with the spurs. Yeah, so I was kind of doing my fingers. Luckily, none of the insects were harmed. And he says, you know what, you seem like you like learning about these kind of things. I like learning about everything. He said, you know what you should do? You should talk to your parents and maybe come down to the museum sometime. Send me an email. I'm like, okay, I can do this. Dealing with roaches and races. Okay, that's cool, right? So send him an email that day, and he gets back to me that day. And we set it up. From then on, that's where it began right there. Like every Sunday, I would come down here to this museum, the other wing way down there, to go and help him with his field work. I was his volunteer for a while, right? So yeah, years and not many years actually, maybe it's just a couple years go by, and he says, we're looking for interns to help us with the mite collection down at the Belter Agricultural Research Center. I said, okay, I'm in. So me and another volunteer or intern, Ken Shimamoto, I'll never forget that guy. We curated the Juncker collection of the National Mite Collection. That was a doozy because some of those mites were in there like so small, like literally smaller than like a grain of salt. And we got through the whole collection over the summer. And I remember one vial we had, like it hadn't been like updated like in like decades, right? We were putting in the new vials. I opened it. How could I say it smelled? It smelled like, how people say like garbage or stuff like that, these industries that pay a lot of money, like waste management and stuff. You go and you smell some really, really bad garbage. And, oh, it smells like money. One of those vials really smelled like Donald Trump or Jeff Bezos or something like that. It smelled like money. I'll never forget it. I brought it to the office. I was like, hey, smell this. It was like, ooh. Hey, why don't you go and standardize that vial? Oh, okay, cool. We had lots and lots of adventures. A lot of the things that we did, like along the lines of field work, was like going on these outings, like to the sculpture garden. This fine gentleman, Mr. Al, we'd go and collect butterflies that we were going to use at the early enrichment center for the lessons. Sometimes we'd go out on these moth surveys, and see, he's going to get mad at me if I don't tell you this story. This story about the beetle. I don't know, some of you might have heard it already. So we were out at Prince William Forest Park and we're doing a moth survey. It was like maybe 2 a.m. in the morning. We had been continuously coming out like every couple hours to go and then check the mercury vapor lights and see what we had, right? And it was just always a smorgasbord of bugs, right? We go and find moths. Sometimes we'll find other things, you know. Find Dobson flies. Would find lots of roaches. But we'd also find millipedes and stuff. You know, so we'll just go and then be collecting them off of the sheet, right? And he liked to use the same sheet. That's why I noticed. He always kept like that sheet must have been like decades old, you know? It smelled like money. So I remember was like looking on the ground like anything might have fallen over and stuff like and he sees this big beetle. It's like a brown head, thorax, brown legs, and a black abdomen. Hey, Imran, pick that up right there. I was like, okay. I pick it up. I regretted picking it up. It just felt like you know, like if you like boil some really, really hot water, you know, and you just like keep it there. And then if you like take it like in a spray bottle and like just like spray it on your hands, that's how I felt like, oh, what the hell is that? I just look at my hands, this burns all over my hands. You know, I'm like, what is that? Oh, Emron, that's a bombardier beetle. Bombardier beetle. So why would you do that? You over here have me grab this like dangerous bug and stuff. Like, look at my hands. You want to spray it in my hands? Oh, you'll be fine. He's like, why would you have me do that? Why would you have me do that? He said, because now you'll remember it for the rest of your life. That was a lesson that I really, really took to heart, right? Because I remember a few months later we went and we were doing a horseshoe crab survey. We're out on this little path. I said, hey, Imran, you see that plant over there? Why don't you grab it? I was about to do it too. I almost did not learn my lesson. I was about to do it, and I looked closer. Oh, that's a devil's walking stick. Yes, it was not a misnomer. I thought better. But like those are the sort of adventures that we'll go on, you know? In addition to being a mentor to me, he's like a father to me. I remember these times, you know, I saved the original message that that I sent to him at the library. I'll read it to you. Okay. This was right after the cockroach Daytona 500. Okay. So I just sent him the message, hey, Dr. Adamski, this is my email. So, okay, dear Emron, I just got back to my office and here you are in my computer already. I'm glad to have met you today. You and your parents are invited to visit at the museum. Weekends are the best time as your parents and I have to work during the day. Please ask your parents about what weekend would be good for them to come and visit. A Saturday or Sunday would work for me. Have them call me at home at 202-547-2030 or in my office at 202-447-6810 by email. I'm anxious to hear from them. Dr. Adamski. That email was sent 18 years ago. Some say it takes about 18 years to turn a boy into a man. I would like to think that those 18 years since I met him, I exemplify that. So thank you very much for listening to my stories about Dr. Adamski.
Our next speaker is Meredith McMahon from the Smithsonian Early Enrichment Center, SEEK.
So a lot of you know this guy as Dave. For us, he was always Dr. Adamski, always how he's been known. And even though I've worked with him for over 20 years, he was always Dr. A. This is really an example of just what you would see when he was at SEEK. He was part of our faculty for more than 25 years, and he was a part of the community right from the very beginning. His son was in one of our original preschool classrooms, and Allison Brake, who's one of our original preschool teachers, remembers that well. He was a legend at SEEK, and for a lot of the children, he was one of the most memorable parts of their time at Seek. It was really what stuck with them because he did some weird and wonderful things with them. That's how I always would describe it. Made a huge impression on children, on educators, on families. My own introduction to him started at my first year in 2004. He showed up for back to school night and he handed me a snake. Hi, do you like snakes? He handed me a snake. And fortunately, I did like snakes, which was good because our executive director at the time did not. And I think because I was open to that, that was really the foundation, the start of our relationship. And it just grew from there. One of the things that I always loved about Dr. Adamski was really how he saw children as incredibly capable. He did not think that there was much that was off the table when it came to what he would do with the children. Also, I should note, you can see in this picture, there is in fact a snake. It's one of his favorite unpaid teachers. All kinds of critters. He loved having all kinds of critters as a way to really showcase and highlight whatever that like idea was that he wanted to communicate to the children. He used inquiry and wonder. He would frame the scientific method in a way that they would really understand and would be able to take with them that idea of curiosity and how to ask questions, find answers, evaluate how effective you were or weren't. So it was a huge part of how he approached his teaching at Seek. One of my favorite lessons that he used to do was one that he called cerealogy, where who else would think about taking a whole bunch of different kinds of breakfast cereal and evaluate the different properties of them and like make your predictions, test them out, see how it goes. What's going to get soggy fastest? Rice Krispies, Corn Flakes, which is it going to be? For anybody who's wondering, Wheaties were usually the most aerodynamic. There would be literally cereal flying everywhere. But it was such a wonderful age appropriate way to introduce children to the scientific method. He stopped doing it when I told him that we were trying not to like waste cereal, like, you know, that we wanted food to be something that we were eating. But up until that point, it was one of the best. He really understood that children needed to be hands-on with what they were doing. And so he would think about, you know, what that meant for his lessons. Every year, he would bring in one of his snakes, Oreo, for those of you who are already aware. He would do a lesson with them about adaptation. Imagine the man laying on the floor with his hands by his side, wriggling to try to eat a marshmallow, showing the children how they would, you know, have to adapt what they do if they didn't have arms and legs. Every year. He did that one every year. Scared some of the teachers. Kids usually loved it. And that's really how he approached what he did. He had another lesson that he did about termites that illustrated like the sense of smell. Cockroaches. You've all heard about the cockroaches already. We know about the hissing cockroaches. We know about the cockroach races. They showed up every year. I got to tell you, I was not a fan when he would leave the bucket of them in my office next to my desk, and I could just hear them. Not my favorite. Snakes, sure. Cockroaches, not so much. But the kids loved it. And then there were chicks. We incubated and hatched chicks every year, except for that one year when the incubator failed us. It's not a pretty year, but even that, he turned that into a learning opportunity. And, you know, this is what happens. Sometimes eggs don't hatch. Sometimes like chicks get halfway out of the egg. But he took everything that he could and made it a learning opportunity. And it was one of the things that I think we all appreciated about him. His commitment to Seek was huge. He made a point of figuring out how he could still teach even when there was a time when he was more like his daily like work had him out in Beltsville and not on the mall as much. He still figured out a way to be able to teach at Seek. We used to have an annual auction, and he would do a camping trip that was one of the items for auction. That usually commanded a huge huge amount of money. There was always a contest between, a couple of the age groups, like who was going to get the camping trip with Dr. Adamski. And inevitably, whoever won out and whoever lost out, he would volunteer to do another one, but make sure that we got paid twice. So, he was always looking out for us. He did some like really, really fun things with a lot of the classes at Seek that went beyond what he could do here. I mean, already know about the young entomologist. He did things like, taking the class, our kindergarten class, they went out to Cirque every year. In fact, do I have? There he is. And they would spend time in the woods with him, and then they would be on the bay with him as well. And oh my goodness, the number of families that we had, the number of parents who had to put on leaky waders and go seining and like see what they could find. But inevitably they would find stuff and they would be completely enthralled with how he was sharing it all with them and like really making it come alive for them. He took so many of our classes to the Naval Observatory to get to like actually use the telescope. We did that for years until there was security risks or concerns about it and we couldn't do it anymore. But that was one of the things that every year the kindergarten class really looked forward to. And who gets to do that as an adult? To get to do that as a 6-year-old was really incredible. There was just a tremendous amount that he put into his just regular lessons with the children and the educators. It was always, he wanted it to be hands-on. He wanted it to be visible for them. He did a lesson every year where he would swab their hands and we would grow germs. That one freaked out a lot of people because of the things that actually grew. But oh my goodness, it was such a wonderful way for the children to like understand, like, what does that mean? Every year he had all kinds of things he did in the classroom. They would dissect owl pellets. Some people do that in college. He was doing it with 6-year-olds. One of my all-time favorites that he did, here they're actually dissecting out, working on the owl pellets. He did a lesson on gravity where he would roll down the hill and then he would have them push him back up and you could see how much harder it was to push someone back up the hill because of gravity. This was 3 years ago. Even when like he was slowing down a little bit, it was a little harder for him to get around. He was still rolling down the hill. This is actually on the side of American history. So commitment to what he was doing with the children. As many people have said, I was so fortunate to have a personal relationship with him. I was one of those people that I would like show up at my office and there he was. Do you have a minute? And we would sit and we would chat. Incredible sense of humor. He always had a funny story, a quick joke. Sometimes he crossed the line. He knew when he had crossed that line, because that was usually when I said, there was a line, you saw it, you crossed it, get out. And he would laugh and he would be on his way. But he'd be back the next day. Sometimes it was for snacks. He was always looking for snacks at Seek. And we were usually able to provide those. I can't not comment on, and I know others have said this as well, the ubiquitous vest. It was everywhere. One time he actually sat down in my office and he was wearing a black vest, which I was like, black vest, what? And he said, oh yeah, no, I had a special event. This is my fancy vest. The man had a fancy vest. So many conversations over the years, conversations that were interrupted by his quacking duck ringtone. I bet a bunch of you have heard that too. Always entertained the kids. And there were so many times that, he would just come in. He didn't really have a reason. He was just, coming to check in. He told me once that sitting in my office and chatting with me was like his form of therapy, which I wasn't quite sure. I was like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And should I start like charging a fee for this? He did actually bring me candy from my candy bowl, so I feel like that was probably my fee. But we talked about so many things over the years. Hockey, I know that was mentioned. We shared a love of hockey, so he, knew that he had a willing audience for that one. But it was other things too. Sometimes it was about religion or loss or, family. So many things that he shared, and he shared so much of it, of himself, with all of us at Zeke. He shared that with me, for which I'm incredibly grateful. He's tremendously missed, but he left us with an incredible blueprint for a life well lived. And for that, and for him, I'm incredibly grateful. So thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker representing the Young Entomologist Group is Alan.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan Pulcinevich. I'm the other Polish guy. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Adamski way back in 2004. I bumped into him in the food line at a LEPSOC meeting here in College Park, getting coffee, and then guess what? The following Saturday, I was here at the Smithsonian volunteering, and I haven't left. So I had the amazing experience of helping Dave both as a volunteer working on his Boston Basin project, doing a lot of looking at his papers and looking at his many charts and tables and make sure that everything was lining up and all the spelling was correct. But then I also had the pleasure of helping him with the Young Entomologist Group. He let me know about this idea he had. He's like, yeah, don't you think that'd be a cool idea? I said, I think that'd be an awesome idea, because you're a perfect teacher. You taught me all the stuff I know, and I'm not even an entomologist. So Dave started the Young Entomologist Groups back in 2012 as an outreach program from the Entomological Society of Washington. And I don't know if I can show some pictures. So just going to rush through some pictures as I talk here, just to show you the experiences the YAG participants and the families had and the YAG educators had with Dave in the field. As you can see, he had joys in his eyes in the work that he did, but then you see the joy in the children's eyes and the family's eyes participating in the program. He conducted programs all across the region, from Delaware to West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and everywhere in between. He mentored us, both young and older alike. And no matter the age, he had a personal commitment to engaging each person participating in the program. He made sure we engaged through hands-on fieldwork, observations, questions, touching bombardier beetles. I knew better, but one day he held me a pillowcase. He's like, Alan, can you hold this? I'm like, sure. I didn't realize Oreo was in there, and I'm not a fan of snakes. So I learned never to hold a pillowcase from him again. So I learned from that one, just like Emron did. But he engaged the youngest members of YAG, some as young as 4 years old or maybe even younger, but always did it with respect, with encouragement, and that sense of humor that we all came to know and love. And several older members of YAG, those in their teenage years, they had a great experience working with Dave on projects. whether independently as part of being an SI intern. But he not only worked on teaching them about the scientific method, but taught them how to give presentations, how to give that information, coached them on their speeches over and over again. And he did it with great patience and great support. He taught them not just about science in the natural world, but how to prepare themselves for success in the future. And I think we see that here today. In short, he gave them a rare opportunity to glimpse the high standards of what it means to be a scientist and how to do that at an early age, all the while being a friend. And these opportunities with YEG were not just for the participants, but also for the family members, whether they're parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, siblings, everyone was invited. He made a point to participate with everyone, whether it's being out there at 2 o'clock in the morning, checking those dirty moth sheets, as many of us have done, sweeping those nets in the field, tagging the horseshoe crabs, and so much more. And encourage everyone and ask questions of everyone, no matter what their age was. And for those who were educators, our guest speakers, or anyone that was invited along to join Dave on the young entomologist groups, the children who participated and graduated from this program are still around and are taking part of this. There are many guest speakers who spoke at many of the YEG events, but we just wanted to highlight a few this afternoon. Mignon and Don Davis were regular supporters going on hikes and talking about the alligator ant mounds at Little Bennett Regional Park. Dennis Bartow leading the horseshoe crab program at Delaware Bay. You saw some photos there. Gary Hevel giving a talk about porch light entomology and what you can find in your own backyard. You don't have to go to a park. Just turn the light on in your backyard and see what you find and those discoveries right in your own backyard. Or Ron Ochoa talking about his experience and what it meant to be an entomologist and how he became an entomologist today. And even topics that were not had anything to do with entomology, but those on reptiles, even recycling. Even though he was not an avid recycler, he did invite Rocco, the recycling retriever from Montgomery County, down to Seek to talk to the children about recycling. I'm one of the recycling specialists in Montgomery County, so I had to get special permission from the DC Office of Recycling to transport Rocco across state lines into the district to talk about recycling in the district, even though he was a Montgomery County mascot. And he just loved Rocco and asked us to bring him as often as we could. So Seek probably remembers Rocco, the recycling retriever. But we want to take the opportunity to thank everyone who's allowed us to continue this in Dave's memory. Dr. Samoas, our ESW president, the executive committee, and members who have been so instrumental in allowing to provide us guidance, support, encouragement to continue this as an outreach program of the Entomological Society of Washington. Thank you to Dave's family for sharing him with us all these years. I'm the one responsible for getting him the plaque for Christmas, so I'm the guilty one. But he always talked about the family and what it meant to him. But he was family here for us as well. And thank you for sharing him with us and letting him come back down in January to continue to work down here. And we just look forward to continuing his enthusiasm, what he shared with us for all these years. He's left a long time lasting legacy that will have far-reaching impacts on all of us, on the future of science, and the lives of all the members for years to come. We know that YEG was a great source of joy for Dave, and it's an honor as us as his friends to be here to help to see that that continues. Thank you, Dave, for your patience, your generosity, your dedication, your support, and enthusiasm for teaching us what it means to love nature, to take care of one another, to enjoy life, both young and old. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have now time for a few sort of show of hands. Yeah, one second. From the audience, and I see one here, and I know one over there. So if you come to the podium, say your name, and then share what you would like to.
Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Kreingold. I'm the conservation director of the Isaac Walton League in Loudoun County, and I thought that this event shouldn't happen without I mentioning David Adamski's love affair, secret love affair with Loudoun County. And I call it a secret love affair because nobody's mentioned it. So here's how it works. It worked in a very simple way. 10 years ago or so at Isaac Walton, we wanted to have a series of events on conservation. I wanted a moth event. I went to the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. See those people over there? They're from Loudoun County. And I said, you got anybody on moths? And they said, there's this guy Adamski. I called up Adamski. He came out to Loudoun County. Now, let me say something about Adamski. You think of going out to Loudoun County. I think of going out to Loudoun County 35 minutes on a Sunday, 60 minutes on a regular week, right? No big deal. But Adamski drove 20 miles an hour. So every time he went out there, it was a big adventure, and he had to sleep over my house because he wasn't going to go back at night. So he became the Mothman of Loudoun County. Every July, supposedly in celebration of National Moth Week, I don't know if that's even real, but that's what he said. He would give a lecture on moths. We would have between 40 and 70 people there from the community on our beautiful 88 acres overlooking our wonderful 5-acre pond. You're all invited. And he would give a lecture on moths, and he would, of course, set up his, what I call moth traps, and what he called the sheets. And we'd go out and look at the sheets. And of course, because where we were, we'd get imperial moths, we get lunar moths, we get all kinds of great things. Okay, hold on. I got 1 more minute to go, right? Yeah. You see how I did that? So anyway, what happened was that we have an organization in Virginia called the Virginia Master Naturalists. And at Banshee Reeks Nature Preserve, which is 800 acres nature preserve in Loudoun County, we train naturalists. We train 25 a year. It's a class that goes from September to April, and we cover every other week. We cover a subject, ichthyology, botany, etc. And one of the things that we cover is called, thank you. She's the head of the training committee. Invertebrates. We needed someone to give us, somebody without a backbone. No, we needed someone to talk about invertebrates. So I said, well, let's get Adamski there. So Adamski would not only give a lecture, but here's what happened with Adamski, which was so wonderful. These people were between the age of 20 and, well, I'm 75. So between the age of 20 and 75, he would divide them up into 3 groups. You go in the pond, you go in the field, you go in the woods, come back in a half hour with everything you've collected, and we would sit down and he would identify it. Class ends at 3. Inevitably, people would stay till 5 o'clock because Adamski was avuncular. He was even avuncular if you were 75 years old, which is very interesting, right? He was like your old uncle, and everyone loved this guy. He'd give a great lecture on invertebrates. He'd give a great identification, and he came to all our Christmas parties. I said it was a love affair with Loudoun County. He came to all our Christmas parties. He came to our picnics. You'd always know where Adamski was because there'd always be a crowd around him, okay? And I just had to tell you that, okay? That was another aspect of his life, not to mention that he would always call at 8 o'clock in the morning. Oh, my God. Anyway, thank you very much. I really loved the guy. We all loved him, right, Sue? Yeah, everyone loved, right? Right? Even right? Okay. And thank you very much.
Conrad, do you want to come up?
First of all, I'd like to thank Torsten and Talita for organizing this fantastic memorial to our colleague David Adamski. What I'm going to do is mention a kind of a different aspect of David that probably relatively few people know. He was a gracious host to students, mostly my students from China. They were doctoral students and even postdoc students. And I'm going to read a letter. The letter was addressed to Maureen. And it gives you a sense of the deep appreciation that students from China had with regard to David actually housing them while they did their fellowships here in my lab. Thank you for letting me know about, and I quote, "Dear Maureen, thank you for letting me know about David's passing. I truly hope that he felt at peace and was spared from his suffering." This is from Dr. Rendong of Capital Normal University in Beijing and all the students from Capital Normal University that during the past several years resided in David's house. He was such a good friend to me and provided invaluable support during my time in Washington, D.C. This is particularly from Li Fang Zhao. The 2 years I spent with him left a lasting impression on me, and I'm deeply saddened by the news. I have shared this message with my supervisor in China, Dr. Ren, and my supervisor in DC, me, and students. On behalf of Dr. Ren, our entire team, and all the students at Capital Normal University in Beijing, we extend our heartfelt condolences and deepest gratitude for the immense support and guidance Dr. Adamski offered over the years. As an entomology research group, we were fortunate to interact with him during his time at the Smithsonian Institution. His kindness, wisdom, and unwavering support made a significant impact on our students, especially those who studied abroad, including Li Fangzhao, which was the last student that he supported or housed in his house, Lang Chen, Yang Zhizhang, Wei Fong, Xiaodan Lin, Wangfang Li, Chang Yang, and others. His mentorship was not only advanced out of scientific work, but also inspired us to pursue excellence with integrity and passion. Many of our students, and I'm quoting from Dr. Rendong, and colleagues still fondly remembered how David generously shared his expertise, offered encouragement during his challenging times, and created opportunities for meaningful collaboration. His legacy will continue through the researchers that he mentored and the lives he touched. We will always remember his kindness and friendly attitude toward our team, as well as the invaluable help he provided. Such generosity will never be forgotten. If there is anything we can do to support him during this difficult time, please do not hesitate to reach out. We would be honored to help him in any way we can. And concluding, Dr. Adamski will be deeply missed, but his kindness and spirit of cooperation will always be remembered. With sincere sympathy, Dong Wen and the Capital Normal University students in Beijing. Thank you.
Thank you, Conrad. And Conrad Lavandera is a curator in paleobiology of insects, fossil insects. And so there were insect connections of his students from China. And oops, is there another slide for? Okay, sorry for that. Last speaker representing the family of David, Tracy Adamski.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you. Alan, you thanked us for letting you have David. And I want to thank you, his DC family, for being here for him when we couldn't be. We do appreciate all the love and support that you guys have given to him because he is a very special guy. So I'm here representing family today. Gonna go through just a couple of key points. I think some of you there's gonna be themes that we've heard elsewhere today. A little bit of the chaos, a little bit of the teaching. But this is like our little core family. I'm Tracy, I'm his niece. I'm here today with my husband, Chris, and my uncle's grandnephews, Simon and Adam. Also here representing my father, Jim, who couldn't make it here today. And my cousins are also watching on Zoom. So we appreciate that opportunity for everyone to kind of participate. So I thought I'd start with, the cherub who arrived in the family on March 2nd, 1950, forever altering my family's life. So looks so cute. But he was the youngest of three, pushed my father from being the youngest when he arrived on the exact same birthday. So they have shared birthdays all the years. But these three, my Uncle Carl, my father, Jim, and my Uncle Dave, they really truly enjoyed each other's company. And throughout their lives, they, continued to stay in touch, continued to again, just always enjoy each other, needle each other, and cause chaos together. These, when we would have family events, these guys were inseparable, although they should be separated at all costs, at all times. Because when you got them together, you would think that it's like the three, me and my cousins, the younger generation, that would be, kind of causing all the trouble. But no, you put these three together and there's water fights, food fights, air hockey pucks flying across the room. So they always truly had a great time together. Sometimes you could put two of them in a room together and they'd be okay, but add the three of them and who knew what was going to happen? But it was, always fun, always entertaining. I think some people here had mentioned my uncle's smile and his laughter. And that was something that always filled our family gatherings. And then I'm going to touch a little bit on my other perception of my uncle as being a forever student. As we had a slide earlier going through all the degrees that he got. He really was in college forever. But that being said, he wasn't just a student in college. He continued to be a student throughout his entire life. He had a certain curiosity, a certain wonder of the world. And that's something that he always shared with others, kids and adults alike. I was able to take advantage of it with my kids when for Christmas we would have Science Day with Uncle Dave, where we would paint T-shirts with dead fish, go through the owl pellets, the hissing cockroaches did make it up to Massachusetts too, much to the chagrin of Simon's first grade teacher, where we got them on the floor, and my uncle took great pleasure in getting Miss Bates, our first grade teacher, on the floor, racing a cockroach with the rest of the kids. So, this was something that we truly enjoyed. But as some other people have mentioned here, my uncle didn't lecture. He guided. You never got a straight answer. You got, look at the world around you, ask questions, think about it, develop your own hypotheses. come up with your own ideas. So it's teaching the scientific method. It's not just telling people what to think, it's training how to think. And this is the man who would invite the Jehovah's Witnesses, sorry if there's any in the room, but like invite them into, his kitchen table and argue the Bible with him. You might have had some of those types of conversations. I think he might have converted a few of them. But, this was someone who was always curious about everything, not just the insects, not just the natural world, but all the world around him. And he shared that with us and obviously with all of you too. And so these are the things that, some of the things that I will remember from my uncle. And as I think of him in the great beyond, casting his net, having his black light and white sheet, the thing that, I take with me and remember is his curiosity, the wonder of the world, and, just living life to the fullest. And so to me, that's his legacy for me, for my family, for my kids. And thank you all for having us here. And again, thank you for being his DC family.
Thank you very much for those wonderful words. And that concludes sort of the program. Please move over now to get some refreshments and snacks, fruit. Thank you everybody for participating online. Sorry for the technical issues, but that's just happens in this world. Thank you very much.